Welcome to the Nucleate Podcast. My name is Sam Kessel, and I'll be your host today. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Irene Blat, who is the Senior Director of Search and Evaluation at Servier, which is a French pharmaceutical company that is building its presence in the US. Irene's focus is identifying promising early-stage companies within hematology, oncology, CNS, and GI, and runs the Golden Ticket Award for Servier. Irene got her bachelor's in biology at Duke and a PhD at MIT in cancer biology. She has extensive experience in working at Genuity Science and Veracyte prior to joining Servier in Boston. Thank you for joining the Nucleate Podcast today, Irene.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. What was your background and upbringing like, and how did that lead you to a career in biomedical sciences?
Yeah, so actually my family is originally from Venezuela, but I grew up in North Carolina. And my parents were in grad school when I was young. So I had my first introduction to the lab at a very young age. I remember on the weekends, sometimes my parents would take me to the lab with them while they finished up experiments that they needed to do, and I would take my toys and entertain myself. And then sometimes if I was lucky, I got to look through a microscope. So that was always fun. But it was exciting to me because, I got to see what they were doing, and it was, something totally different than what I knew at that age. So I had really great examples of what life as a scientist was like.
So you basically grew up in the lab then.
Yeah, it feels that way. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so when you ultimately pursued your own PhD, did you always know that you wanted to pursue a career in industry, or were you also considering a career in academia for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, initially I was just enamored with science and particularly with biology. And so I was sort of open to where the career could go. I really liked the hands-on experience that I had in the lab in grad school. I liked sort of looking at really challenging problems. And then my lab, actually, we did a lot of tool development. And so figuring out, okay, how can we bring innovation to tackle some of these tough questions that we're trying to address and really test the hypotheses. So I would say initially I was open to a career in academia. I liked teaching and I liked working with students. But over time, I really liked the technology side and the sort of advancing more translational questions. And I became interested in industry. I think, for me, it was difficult to know at that point what else I could do. I think there's so many options as a PhD. So it was one of the things I was considering.
That's really interesting. And it's one thing that we've heard from a lot of our guests is that they really like the science and they enjoy working in the lab and learning a lot that way. But it's often a desire to see the results of the work that you do and translate them into medicines and to have that impact on patients that ultimately drives a lot of people to industry. Was that part of your story, or was there like a singular moment, or was it more just a gradual shift over time?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I was in a cancer biology lab. We were working with mouse models of human cancer, so it was very tangible, what we were working on, and certainly, wanting to be closer to how do we, okay, we've looked at these challenging biological questions, and maybe we have more insight into this biological pathway, but it left me with a longing of, okay, what next? So how does this translate into something meaningful for patients, for example. So I definitely think that was part of what drew me to industry, was that we were working on a very related problem for patients, and that it was an opportunity to advance medicines in these spaces. Okay, taking some of the learnings from the academic world and building on that, and developing tools or capabilities that could help address that.
That
So
make
definitely.
that makes a lot of sense. And so if you could go back in time, talk to your PhD version of yourself and give some advice, what advice would you give to someone in a similar situation that's playing their next steps and considering a career in industry?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think when I was in grad school, it wasn't something you talked about. I think it was if you were in a PhD, you were on a track to do academia. And so talking about other career paths was not so common. I think that's changing quite a lot. But for me, I it was when I was reaching sort of the graduation point and I had to figure out what I was going to do next. That's when I started looking for people that I could talk to learn more about industry. And I would wish I would have built that network earlier in my graduate school years to really start learning more about what the different opportunities are. I think one thing that's really amazed me about industry is how many different paths you can go down. So industry is not, I think when I was in grad school, I thought industry was, okay, I would go from being a scientist at a bench in an academic lab to being a scientist at a bench in an industry lab. And there's so much more beyond that. There's IP and regulatory, competitive intelligence, the business side, manufacturing, medical writing, the list goes on and on. There's so many different opportunities. And I would have loved to have met other people who worked in some of these different areas to learn about their different career paths and how they got there, and building that network of mentors and advisors earlier on, so that I could really have a better understanding of what areas to explore. I think I did sort of more of a circular, not circular, but sort of a not direct path to where I am today, which I don't regret, because I learned a lot along the way. But I'm sure that there could have been a more direct path to industry had I had a better sense of the different opportunities earlier on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's something that's changed pretty dramatically. I'd say really in the last few years, where a lot more graduate programs in the sciences, to my understanding, are a lot more friendly to alternative career paths, um, and I think a lot of folks are willing to be mentors who are working in the industry, and adding some transparency to what options are available, rather than having this kind of culture of like, you do academia and this is what you're here for. And I think that's a pretty dramatic change too
Mm,
for folks. And a lot of it seems to be becoming more common for PhDs to be leaving academia nowadays.
mm, yeah. No, and I do think it's changing. I was actually recently on a panel at MIT to talk about career opportunities in industry, which when I was there, I don't remember that there were very many of those. So I think it's definitely a shift, and I think it's exciting because I think PhD students are so well equipped to do so many different things that it's important to find the right fit for the right skill set.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a good segue into talking about search and evaluation, which I think is a really cool mix of having to understand deeply the science that you're reviewing when you're looking at, potential drugs that you're evaluating or startups that you're looking at, and understanding what role they can play, and understanding how potential molecule could be developed further. So it'd be great to explain what is your role in search and evaluation. How does that have the intersection between the scientific and business worlds, and how you marry those two together in that role?
Sure. So yes, I'm in search and evaluation, and specifically I focus on oncology at Servier, and I work very closely with our colleagues in the R&D team, the research and development team within oncology, because I think it's important to really understand our current pipeline and our current capabilities, to really have a clearer view of where we can find synergistic opportunities or things that could complement what we're doing, from the ecosystem, from partnering. So I spend time with our colleagues understanding their projects. I spend time looking at the pathways that we're interested in, and understanding sort of where the next wave of innovation is coming within these pathways or indications that we're looking at today. Um, and we try to do both a proactive and a opportunistic view of this. We look for where the opportunities are within these areas that we've identified strategically. And then we also opportunistically, meet companies at networking events, at partnering conferences, throughout the ecosystem, to really have a handle on where the next wave of innovation is coming, and being able to meet folks that are working in those spaces. And from there, I think the once we've aligned on the scientific part, we find the opportunities that work well with what we're looking for, and the science sort of passes the test in terms of the quality of the data and the quality of the experiments that have been done, then we have to have a business discussion as to how this partnership will work. Who will do what, who is best positioned to do what aspects of the project, and identify really the opportunities that we can complement each other with our different capabilities. And so I think figuring out how the partnership will work, what are the terms, obviously, of the business terms, the financial terms, and defining sort of the roles and responsibilities of each team is really important. So I work very closely with our colleagues in business development, who really support more on the transaction side as we prepare the term sheet and as we prepare the contract, and have these negotiation discussions, more for the business terms, but really set up the best opportunity for each team to really be successful in the partnership.
It sounds like it's a really exciting intersection that you have to deeply understand what Servier's capabilities are, but you also have to have a very deep knowledge on a lot of different topics too. You have to have your finger on the pulse of cutting edge innovation and how it could potentially fit in with what Servier is doing when finding new startups to talk to, figuring out which ones are the most interesting and relevant, and really understanding the science of what they're doing and what is exciting. So it sounds fascinating and also really fast paced to constantly be keeping up with all the changes that are happening in science. So I'm sure you're constantly reviewing literature and making sure you're up on recent advances and how they could potentially be a fit for Servier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely exciting. I definitely enjoy sort of the opportunity to meet with different early stage companies in the ecosystem, and having the opportunity to attend a lot of scientific meetings. I think that's really, for me, some of the biggest value is being able to go to poster sessions and presentations. And that's where I think companies are really, of course, putting forth the best data they have. And I think that stimulates a lot of ideas because they may be looking at something from a different lens. And, for us, it could be, oh, well, that's an interesting pathway that we've also been looking at, but we've been looking at a different target in the same pathway. So maybe these programs could come together, for example. So I really enjoy being both in the science, but also thinking more strategically around how this can advance the pipeline and really help advance the business as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's a good segue to talk about what is the mission for the business at Servier and the vision for the organization, how that intersects with what you're trying to do with early stage biotechs.
Hmm. Sure, yeah. So Servier, we are committed to therapeutic progress for the benefit of patients. So we're a little bit unique. We are a private organization, so we're not traded in the public markets, and we are governed by a foundation. So we don't have the same sort of shareholder pressures that perhaps other companies in our industry have. And this really gives us a little bit more flexibility to dedicate efforts to discovery and advancing these innovative therapies in these really hard to treat areas that we've gone into therapeutically, and we, while also making sure that our pipeline is sustainable. So we fund our R&D through the revenues that come from our business, and so it's important for us to have a sustainable pipeline, but also having an impact on patients. And as I said, I mean, we're in these very challenging areas. So in oncology, we're in heme indications like AML and MDS and ALL. In the solid tumor space, we're in gastrointestinal tumors like colorectal, pancreatic, and gastric, as well as in CNS tumors like glioma and glioblastomas. So I think these are really difficult indications where there hasn't been much progress in the last several years. And so I think incremental changes will probably not bring the benefit to the patient that's needed. So we really need innovative solutions. And that's where, for us, it's so important to be able to engage with the early stage biotech ecosystem, because we know that's where a lot of the innovation is coming from. And again, I think we have a lot of the disease area expertise. that we know that we can benefit from some of these early technologies and approaches that can help us really make advances for the patients.
So looking for those cutting edge technologies that aren't just going to have an incremental benefit, that are potentially transformative, is really the goal there, it sounds like. And you're looking for those transformative therapies, big step changes in science. So it sounds like you're willing to take pretty significant risk on in order to find those therapies to help these really intractable conditions like you mentioned.
Yes, it's definitely a risk. I think we recognize that, but I think we've also shown just through our own pipeline that we've taken those risks, and we've, I think it's great to then hear patient stories after that, right? And how these therapies have impacted the patients. So I think with that as sort of our North Star, is, how we're going to impact patients. And it's something that's actually very important to us. We have a patient office. We've made sure that that's incorporated into how we even assess projects, and making sure that our strategies for clinical development is really in line with how would a patient, if I was the patient, how would I, want to be able to take this medicine, and what kinds of effects we can predict ahead of time. So I think that's really what drives us. And so we recognize that there are risks going into these areas, but that's why I think we can't go alone. I think we have to partner. And so we like to think about it as, it's a one innovation engine, because the innovation can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to come from within the organization. It can come external. And I think we also look at it in terms of, it doesn't have to necessarily only be innovation in terms of like bringing in a new asset. It is a risky process, but it's risky sort of along the chain. And so where can we bring innovation? If that's on the manufacturing side, if it's a formulation, if it's enabling delivery of a particular drug to the brain. I think all those things, we can look at many different ways to bring innovation, that aren't purely weighing everything in a singular asset. I think it's how can we enable across the pipeline to really de-risk the process, but also looking with partners.
That's really interesting. And one thing I'll hone in on what you just said was the patient focus as the North Star. I think that's critically important, and every hopefully every pharma is focused on that. But I'd say that it's refreshing to hear that that's anchoring even very early discussions, which I do think is unique. Is having that patient focus very early on and incorporated into your discussions around innovation, and how a potential partnership is anchored around, okay, is this something that we are convinced patients would be willing to take and would actually be solving the root problem. I think probably a lot of folks who are working in the lab sciences, they're pretty far away from patient care and what the patient experience is. So it's refreshing to hear that that's something that you integrate early on into the process, because it is critically important, and every decision you make early on has knock-on effects for how patients ultimately receive a therapy.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give to an entrepreneur who's working on these innovations, that has a patient focus in mind? What advice would you give to an entrepreneur who's interested in Servier's golden tickets, or other types of programs and partnerships?
Sure. No, I think that's a great question. And so in addition to the golden tickets that we have both in the Boston area as well as in Paris, actually, we also have a program with the California Life Science Association. It's the Fast Discovery Award, to really help accelerate the initial sort of navigating the challenging ecosystem for an early stage startup. And I think, think of Servier as a partner of choice. That's really our goal with these activities is, we want to make sure that people know about Servier, and we want people to know more about our mission, as well as, letting people know that we're in oncology. We're also in neuro, which also has a lot of challenging indications that we're focused on. And so I think to be able to tackle these, we really need we need these early stage partners to help and make advances. And, I think our team is open to providing feedback, and we're pretty transparent about what we would like to see to advance the program. And I think, recognizing that that comes from years of deep expertise. We have a very experienced team, and they've seen failures and they've seen successes. And so I think their feedback is more in terms of what is the crucial experiment that can help determine moving on to the next stage. And so, we really, again, want to make sure that we can help everyone accelerate through this very challenging process. And, if you have innovative solutions in oncology or neuro, we're eager to connect with you. And so you can check out more about our early innovation awards on our website. It's servier.us/partnering/early innovation awards. So we'd love to connect with you. And I'm happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn. But really, we're here, we're in the ecosystem, and we want to work with you.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure all of the budding entrepreneurs and or current entrepreneurs listening really appreciate that offer. So thank you for that. So building off of that in terms of, the entrepreneurial spirit at Servier and the partnerships that you do, what has been the most rewarding experience for you since starting at Servier?
Yeah, I think it's good to reflect on that. I haven't been at Servier all that long. I've been here almost 2 years. But in the last 2 years, I would say it's been a really exciting time at Servier. And I think for me, some of the most rewarding experiences have really been when we've been able to hear these patient stories, and how therapies can really have a meaningful impact for them on their lives. And a lot of what we do in the US has come from partnered innovation. And so seeing sort of the benefits of working together, so pairing Servier, who's been around for 70 years, and is a global company and has a global reach, but working with with partners in the ecosystem to advance some of these therapies into these difficult to treat indications, I think is extremely exciting for the potential of what we can do together, and just really demonstrates the impact that these kinds of partnerships can have, and really advancing these innovative therapies for patients. So, you know, certainly being part of the Golden Ticket events and seeing some of these new opportunities that are coming into the ecosystem, different ways to tackle some of the same problems we've been facing for many years. It sort of reminds me of the stories from our colleagues who were in the early days of Agios that Servier acquired a few years back. And so, I think just keep persevering. I think it's a really exciting time to be working in these different areas. And I think the engagement of the companies in this ecosystem is phenomenal, and it definitely is meaningful and can have an impact long term.
Absolutely. And speaking of the long-term impact, what do you think is next for Servier in the long term with the early stage biotech partnerships? What is most exciting for you when you're looking forward?
Yeah. So we announced couple years ago that we have very big ambitions for 2030 at Servier, and our main one of our main ambitions is to be innovative and patient driven, with a rich pipeline built around these pillars of oncology, neurology, and historically we've had a long history in the cardiovascular metabolic disease area as well. Um, and so again, I think to achieve this goal, we won't be able to do it on our own. We'll need to partner to really accelerate the pipelines in these different indications. And so I'm looking forward to the opportunity to continue to build in the US ecosystem. We've been in the US for about almost 6 years now. And so I think we're continuing to expand our reach within the ecosystem, engaging with companies in different parts of the US. And I think for us, learning sort of where those hubs are and learning how to engage with early stage companies to build towards this pipeline ambition that we have is been really exciting for me, and being able to see sort of the potential of these technologies, that how they can fit in with some of the stuff that we're working on internally. I think just the synergy opportunity there is really exciting.
That's fantastic. And this also helps segue to the next topic on taking a step back from Servier and your role specifically. What are some trends in the overall biotech field that you are following and excited about that you think are going to have long-term impact?
Mm. Yeah, I think for me, my just by way of background, I did work in cancer biology, and I actually worked on KRAS when I was in grad school. And I think um, for so long it was an undruggable target, but we know so much about it. We know so much about the biology, um, and but so many attempts that have failed. So for me, it's thinking about things like KRAS, where there was nothing, and then all of a sudden there's been progress and now a lot of innovation, a lot of activity in that space. And so, I just think about drugging the undruggable. And I think there's a lot of capabilities with AI now, and a lot of advances in terms of crystallography and structures and virtual screening, and just bringing the AI capabilities to this sort of big data problem that we're having in the space, and being able to take targets that we actually know quite a lot about in terms of biology, years and years and years of research, and finding ways to make progress against those. I think that for me has been, really fun to watch. And the what's old is new again. It's something that's fun to see, and I think it's really standing on the shoulders of giants, because I think there's so many people that have tried to tackle this problem and just been not been successful, and then to see sort of the rapid progress in the last several years, it's been something fun to watch. And so I think there's other targets, right? It's not just KRAS. There are many others that I think have had some good progress in the last several years, things that are not kinases, and different, there's different drugging modalities now, different approaches that we can take. I think all of that has really just unlocked the potential to go further, in particularly in oncology, which is more my background, of course.
That's really interesting. Drugging the undruggable, and the what's old is new again. I think are really interesting quotes that you just said, that there are targets that we do have deep understanding of, but have not been able to effectively target with previous modalities. I am curious to see how it plays out with AI, potentially generating new molecules, whether small molecules or biologics, to target those. And to the point that I've seen several small molecule companies that are approaching, for example, RNA processing in a new way, like a remix, for example. So it's interesting that, even the not necessarily as innovative modalities like small molecules, the old becoming new again. So definitely you can see that theme from what I've seen in the industry. So pivoting from talking about biotech innovation more to talking about on the personal front, I want to get an understanding of who have your mentors been and what have their influence been on your career. We touched on this a little bit earlier when you were talking about how towards the end of your PhD program, you started reaching out to folks in industry, trying to get an understanding of what they did. It'd be helpful to get a little bit more color on that and the influence they've had on you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think when I was in my PhD, I think a lot of my mentors were probably more on the academic side, and I had some really great mentors there, who really gave me the flexibility to do a lot of exploring, and being open to having those conversations with me about, maybe what's next for me. But I also think as I've progressed in my career, I've built a strong group of mentors who have really advocated for me, and given me opportunities that I wouldn't have thought that I was capable of. But they believed that I could do more than what I was doing, and they gave me opportunities. probably before I thought I was ready to do them. So they were uncomfortable situations. There was a big learning curve, and it really forced me to grow in ways that I didn't know I was capable of doing. But I think those types of mentors for me have been the most important for me, and I still keep in touch with them. And I think these have been mostly on the professional side, but there are others that I have been able to connect with. Just even other women in the industry who have families, and just having people that you can talk to and just sort of discuss life with outside of professional progress, and just how do you balance all of it, and how do you keep your family and your work life going at the same time is tough. But having folks that I can talk to, and understanding how they've navigated it, and that everybody's different and how they approach these things. But I think just having a group of mentors that can both provide professional and I think personal sounding boards has been really valuable for me.
That's fantastic. And it also helps to lead into our next topic about, you mentioned that you've had women mentors, and that historically women have been underrepresented in biotech. And I also want to cover racial diversity in biotech as well. There's a Forbes article out in 2022 saying that biotech has limited diversity, with African Americans representing only 6% of the workforce, Asian employees representing 21%, Hispanic slash Latinx employees at 7%, and Native American employees at less than 1%. This lack of diversity is amplified at the C-suite level, where people of color make up only 24% of executive teams and 28% of CEOs. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but I know that women also have been underrepresented in biotech as well. So we've been asking all of our guests this lately. What do you think the industry can do to better support underrepresented minorities and women in biotech?
Yeah, I'll speak for first from the perspective of women in biotech. I think it's important for other women who have been able to advance, to advocate for more women, to be able to have these opportunities, similar to the mentors that I've had incredible female mentors who were in positions of leadership. And when there was, at the executive level, a discussion about who could take on a particular project, they put my name in the hat. And I'm not there, so I can't speak up for myself, but I think having folks that advocate for you are really important. So I know sometimes I've heard different views that, people are afraid to advocate for other people because they themselves are a minority. And so it puts more pressure on them if they advocate for someone and then it doesn't work out, which I totally can understand. But instead of, I guess, not advocating for that person, see it as an opportunity to say, hey, I'd love to bring you up the next time we have this discussion, but you need to work on this or something. I think being able to not just advocate for people, but if there's mentoring opportunities or development opportunities, to give folks that chance to develop what is missing, because I think that's something that perhaps is missing, is not just saying, you know, advocate for someone just to advocate for them, but this is how you get there, because I think that's not always clear. And I think for somebody that's navigated it, they have more insight at least into how to get there. And if that's possible to share, this is how it worked for me, or these are the things that I know the executive team thinks is important to be able to move up, that, I think advocating for one another is just so important, and really supporting one another. Sometimes we're ourselves our own critics, so we're really harsh on ourselves. So I think it's hard to speak up for yourself sometimes if you don't feel that you have an ally that would really be able to support you in the process, because it is tough, I think, to speak up for yourself when you don't know if others think the same or if you're just out in left field.
For sure. And yeah, I definitely want to reiterate the advocacy and mentorship, and certainly, when there's an opportunity to advocate for someone who you think is not getting the advocacy they need in a meeting, I think it certainly sounds like it's important to do that. But also taking people under your wing, if you're in a position, for whatever position you are, there probably are people below you. So making sure that you're helping bring everyone up, no matter what they are, and whatever level they are in their career, whether they're still in school or whether they're just starting out in their career, supporting folks at all stages. I definitely want to
Absolutely.
emphasize that
Absolutely.
point.
Yeah, and I think I definitely I agree with that. And I think there's certainly ways of that folks can get engaged with companies. There's different programming as well for entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
So I know Lab Central Ignite is an incredible program, and I think there are others in the ecosystem that really help sort of build this network of colleagues that can support and mentor one another. So absolutely, at all levels, it's really important.
Excellent. So the next topic is somewhat related, is how do you incorporate your family and personal life into a very busy career, including mentoring other people and working really hard during the day, and providing that perspective on, people talk about work-life balance. I think a lot of people have moved away from that word. It's work-life harmony, and post-pandemic, there's some remote elements to a lot of people's careers. So how have you incorporated work and life together for yourself?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I think when I used to think about work-life balance, for me that's kind of a farce. I think it's difficult to balance both things. I think there are times when it's more I have to do more on the professional side, and certainly I sacrifice a little bit of the time that I would spend with my family. But then fortunately, I'm at an organization that also provides flexible time off. We, have um, you know, good good balance in that regard. That I think there are times when I have more work to do, more busy with work, and then I can have some opportunities to then spend a little bit more time with my family. When there's sort of a break in between. And I think that's what I've learned to embrace is um, I would say initially in my career, I was just working all the time, never taking uh, too much of a break. And I think as I've progressed in my career, I've learned there's cycles to everything, and I think there are times when we're more busy within our professions, and then there are times when things slow down a little bit, and it used to make me uncomfortable, and now I embrace it. I think those moments are when then I try and spend more time with my family and be more engaged there. And I think beyond that, it takes a village for sure. I know that everybody says it, but it's so true. I've experienced it now. I have two small children, 5 and 3, so they keep me extremely busy. And I couldn't do it without my partner, and I couldn't do it without my family and friends that we've surrounded ourselves with, that, just folks that'll say, hey, I'll pick up your kids if you can't make it one day. I think just offering that to somebody, like, I think maybe somebody says it and they don't think it means anything, but it's huge, like it's so impactful. So again, just be supporting one another and recognizing that everybody has a life outside of work. So
Yeah. I would say sometimes it's easy to forget that when you're working on a major project, but there's always something outside for everybody. And it's nice to hear that there, times where it sounds like people in your life have stepped up to support, which is really, really important. Because no one can really do it all on their own.
that's right. Yeah, you're not alone out there for those that are listening.
Yeah. And so when you do have those lighter periods that you mentioned, obviously I know family is one of your passions, but like when you're spending time with family or on your own, what are your passions? Clearly biotech is one of them, and impacting patients' lives, but outside of that, when you're just trying to unplug, what do you enjoy doing in your free time?
um, yeah, I mean, I think We have a tradition in my family. We go eat pizza every Friday. So I like to eat out. I wouldn't say I'm a foodie, but I like to try new restaurants. And when I have more time, I do like to travel, and I think it's something we enjoy doing as a family as well. I think for work I have to travel a lot, but I don't always get to choose the destination. So it's more fun to travel when I get to choose my destination. And I like warm places living in Boston. I think being able to be outside in some place that's warm is so nice. You appreciate the warm weather so much more after living in the New England region long enough. But yeah, I think for me it's um, being outside. I love being outside and just seeing other things. I think it can be restaurants, can be something more nature, it can be other cultures. I think those are all really rewarding for me to take a break.
Getting out of your normal going to home into the office life.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you joining us today, Irene. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.